Oh, welcome to a special edition of Inside the Birds 2024 NFL Draft Day 2 in the books. Geoff Mosher here with InsideTheBirds.com's Andrew DiCecco. Andrew, I think it's safe to say after watching on Thursday night Howie Roseman sit there, be patient, show restraint as Quinyon Mitchell dropped to him at 26 overall, all bets were off on day 2 of the draft as Howie Roseman starts the night off by trading the 50th and 53rd overall pick, moving all the way up to 40 to grab Iowa's Swiss Army knife defensive back Cooper DeJean. And in that trade, he picks up a third round pick that the Eagles did not have with Washington, and then uses that pick to trade down twice in the third round at the end of the third round, taking a prospect that I'm not sure too many other people other than you had as much intel on going into the pre-draft cycle or going into the draft, and that's an edge rusher from Houston Christian named Jalyx Hunt, who I can't wait to get into with you just because of how much knowledge you already had of him and how much you'd written about him on InsideTheBirds.com. But let's start it off with the first pick, Cooper DeJean. First of all, in summary, Andrew, when I see the Eagles trade all the way up to 40 for a guy like Cooper DeJean, it
Right.
signals to me he probably had a first round pick and they wanted to go capitalize on a guy. I'm sorry, a first round grade, and they wanted to capitalize on a guy that they had highly graded, and they make a very aggressive move up. Conversely, I'm going to guess that by the third round, they didn't feel there was great value there, or that they felt that third, fourth, fifth, you're not talking about a great deal of difference. So why not move back and pick up as many guys, as many darts to throw on your favorite day, day 3? Is that what your read would be on that?
Yeah, and to your point, there's a guy who I really like from in Washington State's Jaden Hicks who still hasn't been taken yet. So
Wow.
I feel like there is a big discrepancy in terms of the top end players, the Cooper DeJeans, the Javon Bulwards, and the Cole Bishops and players of that mold versus the middle tier guys. So I think the Eagles really saw it as an opportunity to pounce on a player who they had a first round grade on. They went in front of the Green Bay Packers, which, if you remember, Adam and I had them really penciled in to go 25 to Green Bay in the
Mhm.
first round. So that made a lot of sense there. And you saw both sides of Howie Roseman, right? You saw the ability to be patient and let the board fall to him and not overcomplicate, take the best player on the board. And then you saw today where he got over aggressive, where he was over aggressive and getting the player that he wanted. And now, over the past few months, you've seen the Eagles add CJ Gardner Johnson, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean. All three players have the common factor in that they are ball hawking players that are going to create turnovers and completely reform that secondary. Now you have some bona fide playmakers on the back end.
Yeah, for a pass defense, they gave up an NFL most. I think it was 35 passing touchdowns last year. But this is not just about last year, right? It's really outside of somewhat of an anomaly 2 years ago when they had CJ Gardner Johnson and James Bradbury played at a high level and they went to the Super Bowl. It's really been a pass defense for several years now that has suffered from, to be fair, 2 decades worth of inability to draft and develop at both the cornerback and safety position. So now we'll see if the Eagles have reversed that curse, so to speak. We'll see if these two players that they've brought in can be like the 2002 draft we referenced yesterday, where they took Lito Shepherd in the first round. And then in the second round, we always talk about how they took Sheldon Brown and Lito Sheldon, but in between, they actually had a first, second round pick, one of two, and they took
Michael
safety
Lewis.
Michael Lewis, which might actually make this 2024 draft 22 years later a lot like that one, depending on where Cooper DeJean is going to line up. Now, we have intel on him. We've talked to a lot of different people. He obviously moved around a lot at Iowa, but played a lot of corner. He was a playmaking corner, like you said, a lot of interceptions. In fact, 2 years ago, he returned 3 interceptions for a touchdown, which
Mm-hmm.
tied for most in the NCAA that year. I think he had in total 8 over the last 2 years, maybe 7 or 8. So he is a playmaker. He is a ball hawk. And to give a scouting report that Adam and I got from, we'll describe this scout as a little over the top at times. He said he felt Cooper DeJean was a top 5 player in this draft, mainly because of his playmaking ability and explosion. But as you know, you've talked to a lot of people too. There's a part of him that's hard to just put into one spot because he's probably not twitchy and fluid enough to be an outside corner in the NFL fully, but he's also too much of a playmaker to just leave him at deep safety and not have him involved. So, Andrew, it may be that being a movable piece in a Vic Fangio defense might be the right marriage and the perfect spot for him, which, by the way, in his video conference, Cooper DeJean said this was the place where I wanted to be.
And I think being a movable piece may have actually worked against him, because if you're a team that you're viewing him, you don't know what you're going to do with him. I think that hurts the player. You're obviously the team that knows what they're going to do with him is going to be the one that's going to be aggressive in finding a way to get him on your football team. So I think that plus the injury that he had late in the draft cycle, he also had the private workout and he was fine. He ran a 4.4. He jumped through the roof. He's he's somebody that's going to be an immediate impact player. And when I view him, Geoff, I viewed him as someone who can play either safety spot and also play nickel. I didn't scout him much as a corner. I didn't see his skill set translating to the next level as a corner, but a highly impactful player on the back end as a safety and a movable piece. He's very he's very shrewd in that he's able to manipulate quarterbacks with his eyes and force throws and make plays on the football and break on the football and be a quarterback on the back end and see the full scope of the field. I think he's really going to benefit working alongside CJ Gardner-Johnson. Let's not forget Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship. And there's a lot to like with that pick.
Yeah, and again, the fascinating part is sort of now figuring out where are the Eagles going here for 2024. We obviously know where they're going for the beyond 2024 because two-fourths or two-fifths of the secondary are going to be, as long as they hold up their end of the bargain, are going to be Quinyon Mitchell and going to be Cooper DeJean. And we'll see what they do here on day 3. And they have some other young guys, right? And they'll probably have Slay for maybe one more year, depending on how he plays this year. But we know that those guys will be penciled in some spot. But I'm thinking 2024, and Cooper DeJean has a cornerback / nickels body and skill set, not necessarily a box safety body, even though he's a playmaker. But CJ Gardner-Johnson also not at all a box safety, more of a playmaker, deep safety. So you
But
kind of wonder.
Sidney Jones is a box safety.
But
So
Sidney Jones is. That's
you
the
have
name I forgot to mention. That
the
is
best
three
of both worlds.
fifths,
Right.
right? That is 2025 and beyond. I love that you brought that up. Sidney Brown, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, and then they still have to find another corner, young developmental corner between now and then. But for this year alone, you do wonder how it'll look. I mean, obviously, Cooper DeJean as the 40th overall pick, as long as he's decent, got to play and start or play a lot significantly. So Quinyon Mitchell, right? And then you've got Darius Slay. What are you doing with your 2 safeties and nickel? CJ Gardner-Johnson is 1 safety. Are you playing Cooper DeJean and maybe Maddox? I'm very sort of fascinated. Is Reed Blankenship now back into the picture because he's surrounded by more talent as a when I say box safety, by the way, we all know there is no box safety in the NFL anymore. The Eagles are going to play a lot of 2 high, but they're going to also rotate, right? One guy's going to come in, one guy's going to go out. So there has to be someone at times, first and second down, that's coming in, leaving, 1 high and playing some run defense there. So it's got to be somebody at that safety spot to do it.
And let's not also forget that CJ Gardner Johnson was a nickel corner when he entered the league. That's how the Saints used him. He has the ability to do that. Cooper DeJean has the ability to do that. Sidney Brown, not so much. He's more of a player who's better around the line of scrimmage, and Reed Blankenship is sort of a cross between the two. I don't know that he's very proficient in deep coverage, but I think that he has moments where he flashes. So I think they're going to find a way to get all those guys on the field, maximize what they do well. This is a new coaching staff, and they're going to accentuate what each player brings to the table from a skill set and intangibles perspective. So I'm really interested to see how they choose to deploy them. But I would have to think, Geoff, you're going to see Cooper DeJean and CJ Gardner Johnson as your starters. And maybe starting out, you'll see Reed Blankenship as a highly effective and highly involved number 3 safety.
Right. And that might only be for the first, 6 weeks, Andrew, until Sidney Brown is really fully ready to come back. And then Vic Fangio is going to sit back and hopefully have everyone healthy and say, now I got a lot of parts here. Now I got some pieces, and now I got some young developmental building blocks. And Andrew, if there's one thing to come out of this first 2 days of the draft with is, like I said yesterday, it's about damn time that the Eagles addressed this secondary with young developmental building blocks who were not like really good high athletic trait rookie free agents. That had to be guys that you found in the draft, and so far they've done that. So I think people will be excited about Cooper DeJean. I think they'll be more excited to start calling him Cooper DeJean because it's Philly. And I'm sure
I'm waiting for them to pluralize his last name, DeJeans.
Cooper DeJeans.
Yeah, that'll be next. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. I tend to think he's one of those guys that's going to be a training camp darling. He'll probably make a lot of plays, right? In the one-on-ones and in the camps and things like that because he's got playmaking abilities. And he'll get people excited. So we'll see. I mean, certainly this is the direction that you and I both felt the Eagles needed to go in. Now let's shift now to the round 3. Because as I said yesterday, we don't, on our platform, and you fit right in with this, we don't say good pick, bad pick. You never know. Guys could be good, guys can be. We talk about approach. Love first round approach because they waited for a guy who probably should have gone higher to come to him, right? Love the approach with Cooper DeJean. I get that now you trade down because the value has started to diminish. I don't know. There's something about this whole late rising Jalyx Hunt from a Houston Christian and all this speed around the edge that gives me, and maybe, I'm getting a little old, right? It gives me the old Brian
Chris
Thomas
Clemens.
vibes.
Chris Clemens.
Chris Clemens vibes. Who's the other undersized pass rushers? Yeah, they were always, there's
Marcus
another
Smith.
name. What's that?
Marcus Smith, but he was obviously a first round pick. But
yeah, but it was more like the small school on a Philip Hunt guy,
Daniel Teo Nasai.
Oh, good example.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Just I get that vibe, and it's not fair. This guy's his own guy. And my thing is, it just feels like there's a lot of analytics involved here. There's a lot of speed around the edge. There's a lot of fastball. But at that bottom of the third round, I didn't see a whole lot of guys going that I was in love with either. What's your thought? You've written a lot about Jalyx Hunt. Give us your scouting report and your overall thought.
Yeah, obviously, I really like the pick, Jalyx Hunt. I think he brings a lot from athletic trait standpoint. He's 6'4", 255, very long arms, explosive, twitched up, former safety at Cornell, 3 years he spent there as a safety. And I think you mentioned analytics and things of that nature that probably factored into it. And I know that we don't say good pick or bad pick, and it may feel like a reach for some, but I always caution folks, don't necessarily go by what you're seeing in mock drafts or what you're hearing in the media. You have to, NFL teams grade these guys a lot differently. And he was viewed internally in league circles as somebody who was very much in the day 2 conversation. And it only became a riser when the word got out. He was always very well, highly thought of. So I think that all that being said, he is a little bit more of a project player. He is a raw, toolsy guy, but I think that getting him in there with Vic Fangio and Jeremiah Washburn to work with him, right? He was in there for a 30 visit. They obviously really liked him. Work with him a little bit, refine his skill set. He has the luxury of not having to step in and take on a lion's share of the snaps. He can develop a little bit and grow. And then by next season, we talked about this. You have we have Huff, you have Nolan Smith, and now you're going to have Hunt as your 3 edge rushers going into next season, at least under contract for sure.
Yeah, it certainly fits their identity. Don't want to say that it doesn't do that. So the approach is understandable there as far as fitting the identity, getting young pass rushers. And to be fair to Jalyx Hunt, it's not like he came out of nowhere like some of those names I mentioned. He was invited to the Senior Bowl and performed well there. Jim Nagy spoke to Adam and I for our draft preview show the other night. Really liked what he saw.
He was a combine guy, so
combine guy, 30 visit, or I'm sorry, 30 visit. He was a 30 visit guy for the Eagles. So it's not like bam, like no, like you said, he was a well-known player, but at the same time, he's polarizing, right? spoke to some people. You, me, and Adam were sharing notes here. You spoke to some people who really liked him and thought he was going to be picked a lot higher than most people thought. Adam spoke to. I remember Adam saying he spoke to a scout who said, "Yeah," or maybe it was a position coach or a scout who said, "Yeah, no, this guy's going to go late day two, and maybe even earlier than late day two." I spoke to a scouting source who can't stand him. No, I'm being mean. He didn't say he can't stand him. He just thought that he said, "I'm glad other teams are going to be picking this guy higher because we're not going to take this guy because his evaluation was straight line speed and not a whole lot there else." But as you're saying, it's not like people don't know that. They just see they see enough tools, and now you got to be able to find the right people to hone the tools and work on them.
That's fair. And I think also having a veteran laden coaching staff on the defensive side, and they know what they're looking for, and they know what they're and they know exactly the traits and the characteristics of a pass rusher that they're looking for. That should comfort and ease the mind of Eagles fans who obviously aren't going to be overly familiar with this prospect. I think he's going to be in a good position to develop and grow. And then by next season, you'll see him be able to take on a pretty significant role. And he'll have a situational role this year. But I wouldn't expect somebody that's going to produce 7, 8 sacks. But this is a good pick, and you got to let things materialize. You don't just want to rush to judgment.
Yeah, we'll see. I always wonder about the short guys. It's like sometimes they have trouble getting off the blocks of the big offensive tackles. Now he does have long arms. Jannard Avery I believe, was long armed despite having a short body, but he always seemed to be a guy, despite having some pretty good twitch, just had trouble disengaging when he got blocked. So we'll see. We'll work the guy. I do like the fact that he had to work for everything he got. He was, like you mentioned, start off at Cornell. All right, as a walk-on, right? A walk-on safety at Cornell, had some years there, and then transferred to a school a lot of people don't know about because it used to be called Houston Baptist. Now it's Houston Christian. Wonder what it'll be next year. Maybe Houston Presbyterian. Who knows? But either way, there's a lot to look at and a lot to work with, and maybe they get something really special out of it. 2, 3 years down the road, which is how you're supposed to look at all draft picks, but especially guys you start to get in day three. I'm sorry, in round three and then later in day three. So the one thing that I think people are happy about, I would imagine, no matter what, is that the Eagles really needed to address their defense. It was not good last year, and outside of the 70 sacks from 2 years ago, hasn't been great. Even 2 years ago under Jonathan Gannon, the 70 sack Super Bowl, there were times where you felt like they weren't getting enough pressure, or not pressure. They weren't getting enough stops on third down. They were getting picked apart by good quarterbacks, and even in Jonathan Gannon's first year, that was an issue as well. So, all right, in the process, Andrew, the Eagles picked up, as I mentioned, the extra pick. So they have 3 4th-round picks tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
They have 3 5th-round picks tomorrow and a 6. So that is 7 players on day 3, which we like to dub here affectionately as Andrew DiCecco Day at Inside the Birds and on this platform. You've done so much great work on InsideTheBirds.com, outlining so many different guys that could be available that the Eagles have shown interest in, or guys that you think the Eagles would benefit by having. So why don't we start off by talking about some names that you would look for?
Well, why don't we start with Cedric Gray, the linebacker from North Carolina? You and me have been talking. He very well could have went the last few picks in the third round. I'm not sure, but you have to think he would garner some consideration at 120 when the Eagles are next on the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Given the need at linebacker, he had a 30 visit that was canceled, so there was interest there. They may have had all the information that they needed on the player. He made the All-Star circuit, and he was at the combine and all those good things. Maybe you want to look at corner. Yes, that's right. Double dipping at corner. Kalen Carson is a player from Wake Forest who should have went, frankly, in the mid to late second round. He's still available going into day 3, at least from when you and I started talking. I think that if you're the Eagles, they brought him in for a 30 visit also, by the way, so there's some interest there. You might want to double dip. You talk about furnishing the secondary. I think he would be a good piece there. Same thing goes for a Sione Vaki or a Mason McCormick, the guard from South Dakota State, who TJ Paganetti, the Eagles assistant offensive line coach, led the workout at the pro day. There's a lot of interest there. I thought he might go in the third round. Here we are going into day 3. he's somebody that you might want to keep an eye on there as well. And then wide receiver. We've talked often about Jaquan Jackson, the wide receiver from Tulane. The Eagles have shown a lot of interest in him. 5'9", 188 pounds, terrific short area quickness, can be a good vertical slot, excellent on the move. I think a guy like Kellen Moore has proven throughout every stop along the way that he's going to accentuate what he does well and find a way to get his playmakers the ball in space. And he is a lethal playmaker when he has a crease.
You mentioned Cedric Gray, right, to start. And listen, I know the position inside linebacker has been devalued by a lot of teams, but I'm stunned. I mean, not only Cedric Gray, but I believe Jalen Ford, is he still available or was he taken from Texas?
Jalen Ford was still available last I looked, and
Wow.
Trotter Jr. is
Jeremiah
still
Trotter
available as well.
Jr. Yeah, I mean, certainly look out for those names. I mean, any one of those three, I think, would be a nice groomable inside linebacker for the Eagles. Kalen Carson is the cornerback from what school again?
Wake Forest. Actually, I spoke to him quite a bit at the podium at the combine. He and I had like a back and forth for almost a few minutes because there's not that many people at his podium. So I got like a one-on-one with him pretty much. Love his confidence. He said he's the best corner in the draft, the stickiest corner in the draft, I believe was his exact quote. Confident. Oftentimes he kept referring back to how he played Keon Coleman and he didn't back down from the challenge and he won a lot of his matchups. And he said, turn the tape on. Not many guys have done it for as long as I've done it. You see a lot of these guys that pop up and they have a year or two of high end production. He goes, look at the tape. I've done it all 4 years.
Wow. And that is a player that Greg Cosell has talked about quite a bit and really likes. So that will be an interesting one, Kalen Carson. How about at wide receiver? The Eagles haven't hit the offensive playmaking position. They did give a extension to AJ Brown that we'll get into in a second. But if we're looking at day three, I know you mentioned Jaquan Jackson. Was there anybody else that you think that might fit them?
How about Jalen Coker? Jalen Coker is a 6'3",
Lacrosse.
210-pound wide receiver, plays a lot of inside, can play outside. Really good route runner coming from Holy Cross. For those who aren't familiar, he went to Holy Cross, so you might not automatically associate that with somebody who's a proficient route runner who's running an elaborate route tree. But that's not the case, Geoff, with Jalen Coker. He's a very refined route runner. Look no further than Steve Smith, the great Steve Smith, who spoke very glowingly about his ability to run routes, attack the football, fearless over the middle, and he is good at separating down the field. I think he has about 4.5 speed. Lots of like there, and he's really good at attacking the football. I think that he might be an interesting guy when you get to round 5. When the Eagles have 3 picks, I believe. I think they still have 3. Who knows? They may have dealt more, but that's where we sit.
Yeah, I got all confused because Steve Smith, the 5-time Pro Bowl wide receiver who played for, obviously the Panthers and the Ravens, he compared Jalen Coker at a Holy Cross to Tim Duncan, which was a very odd comparison since Tim Duncan is not an NFL football player, but a Hall of Fame basketball center. And then I'm like, maybe this is the wrong Steve Smith. Is this Steve Smith, the basketball player? And then I'm like, why would
No,
Steve Smith
no.
the best? No,
The
I know.
only Steve Smith.
I'm saying at the time it all came out. Then I'm like, why would Steve Smith, the basketball player, be studying Coker, the Holy Cross wide receiver, Jalen Coker? So it was all very confusing to me. But it's very rare, but probably very flattering when you get compared to an NBA Hall of Famer when you're a wide receiver in any kind of capacity. So I think that is good.
His versatility and his ability to high point footballs and things like that. He just referred to him as Tim Duncan, and right off the bat, I made a note of it. I got him scheduled for draft dreams. I mean, obviously, I liked him, but the fact that he was on the radar of someone like a Steve Smith made it, kind of piqued my interest as somebody that might be garnering some considerable interest as we move towards day 3.
Excellent stuff. All right, let's wrap it up with this because my fault. I was getting a little tired last night. Neglected to mention that the Eagles made a huge move again with AJ Brown on the draft, first night of the draft, this time giving him an extension. So he signs a really big deal. And this is just another case of, the Eagles deciding because he was going to be out of guaranteed money. And when that happens and you're as good as AJ Brown, you start to say, hey, like I need some security there. And then so it either becomes a situation like Hassan Reddick where you're like, all right, maybe it's time to move on, or you don't want to move on from somebody who's given you back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. So even there's always this kind of like drama surrounding AJ Brown. The Eagles definitely believe that the 1,400 yard seasons back to back are worth it. And they gave him a long-term extension, which I imagine, Andrew, will, at least for this year and next, lower the cap number and help him spread it out. We'll have to see the contract details. But 33 million might look expensive now, but can you imagine once the market is reset after Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and when, you know, the other Bengals receiver, Higgins, finally signs, if, at some point, it's probably going to wind up looking like a bargain again.
Absolutely. And a lot has, not enough has been made in my estimation, Geoff, about how the Eagles have taken care of their own in terms of locking them in long term. They have a young core that's going to be with that, sort of taking advantage of that window together and growing together. Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, Devontae, AJ, they've extended those guys and got them long term into the fold. And then what they've done in free agency and the start to the draft that they've had, I think they've had a really strong offseason, and locking in their top receiver. I didn't see that coming this early, but they made it a priority. And I mean, if that should quell any concerns that anyone may have had.
Yeah, when I was younger and I would go to the combine, Andrew, and it was such a great opportunity to be able to talk to GMs and head coaches and administrators from other teams. I would commonly hear people from good teams that were annually good, like the Packers, they were always very good, the Steelers, Ravens, and they would say free agency is not about the players that you're bringing in. That's what it's become that, but they would say free agency is about the players you're giving money to who are already in your house, and you're extending them because they've played well for you and you've drafted and developed them. Eagles have done they've had some tough drafts. 2020 stands out, but for the most part, the guys that they're giving extensions to have all played really well, deserved it. That was a very good trade that worked out for the Eagles to get AJ Brown. And now you got to sit back, right, and see what kind of impact that the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, brings to this offense, and the strides that Jalen Hurts will make as a quarterback, because the receivers, they don't have to make strides. The only strides they got to make is with their legs going down the field to catch the ball. These guys are pretty darn good.
Yeah, the Eagles have two of the best receivers in the NFL, and now the onus falls on Jalen Hurts to maximize their ability and take advantage of the players that you have at your disposal. This is an elite personnel in terms of offense. You got to find a way to maximize it and elevate your performance and put the Eagles where they need to be, and that's the Super Bowl. And I think this is a big start in heading them in that direction.
Yeah. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for day 2. Now in the books, and that's Cooper DeJean and Jalyx Hunt. Day 3, Andrew DiCecco day. We'll have more after the entire completion of day 3. It'll be Andrew DiCecco and Adam Kaplan wrapping it up. And I'll be taking a little bit of a break to coach some softball. But I will be following along, and, very, very excited to see what amounts from this haul here. Now, by the way, you got 7 picks here. You think Howie's going to get cute and try to make that into 9 or 10 or 12? I mean, like, how much trading up and down can you do at this point?
No, if anything, you're trying to stockpile picks for next year where it's a little lean.
Right.
I don't think they're taking all 7 tomorrow. I would be highly surprised, I should say.
I would agree. Not taking 7, probably not adding, maybe condensing some of these, as you said, to pick up some extra assets or just to move up in either rounds 4, 5, and 6. All right, that's going to do it for this special NFL draft edition of Inside the Birds. For Andrew DiCecco, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.